Header Gallery is part of the New Media Caucus and is dedicated to promoting the creative output of our members by situating their work in thoughtfully curated exhibitions that take place across our entire web presence. New Media Caucus is an international nonprofit association formed to promote the development and understanding of new media art. We represent and serve artists, designers, practitioners, historians, theorists, educators, students, and scholars. Recognizing new media art to be inherently interdisciplinary, multimodal, and evolving, we support and advance a wide range of inquiry to catalyze further evolution of the field. The New Media Caucus is committed to extending and sustaining the diversity of our community, board, and membership. To promote an environment of equality, inclusion, and respect for difference, we prioritize inclusion as an ongoing collaborative process of growth that we continually address both within the caucus and in our field.
Welcome, everyone, to the 27th episode of Header Presents. I'm your host, Renee.
And I'm your co-host, Constanza.
In this episode, we talk about the upcoming CAA conference and our panel entitled Walled Gardens, Wild Artists, where we will answer the question, first of all, what is a walled garden? Who are the wild artists? And why is this subject important in the future of new media and art in general? For this conference, we decided to invite artists Cadmus Tutea and JLS Ganwich to talk to us about their work and generate a conversation. So instead of presenting papers, what they will do is actually engage in conversation with us. We will have some questions, but we hope that we can get the public involved and create a conversation. And this is something that's kind of become a series, with the first one being last year's at Chicago with Constanza doing... well, you want to talk about that one? That's better.
Yeah. Last year, wow, it's already a year. For February at CAA, we did a panel, but the panel was more traditional, right? In which case, the panel was called Reimagining Technologies, or Technological Imaginaries, I believe.
Yeah.
And it had one of the longest names in all of the panels in the CAA brochure conference. And it went really well. We got into talking about what are some imaginaries we can, imagine, right, about how artists are using artworks and developing these ideas into thinking about a world outside our own, but also in terms of potentialities and possibilities, not necessarily utopian ideals, but possibilities outside the ones we have today, right? And we got a lot of interesting discussions with these. It was a curator, an artist, and an art historian, actually, which was very well balanced. So
we got the trifecta. Yeah, it had really good attendance, especially for CAA panels.
For sure.
And not only that, participation was really good. The questions were really good, and in the end, I think that everybody learned something. And it was that last section where the questions were being asked and the conversation happened that inspired kind of my idea of not doing okay, let's read a paper and then just have 2 minutes of questions, right? So let's see what happens. Maybe they'll get upset because I don't think CAA grasps what is going to happen.
Okay. We'll see. I'm sure it'll go well.
Break the rules, break things, ask questions later.
Be wild.
Yeah, exactly. Be wild. And that's the point. What we're talking about in its walled gardens, which is all these siloed sections of the internet, which can be in this particular case, what I'm thinking about is apps and apps created by artists. What are the consequences of creating an app? What are the consequences of, or the benefits and the negatives of doing this, right? There's technological questions, there's upkeep questions, conservation questions, all these things that I really want to find out. Yeah, exactly. And I really want to have these conversations with people who have done that. And that is why the work of JLS Ganwich and Cadmus Tutea is really important, particularly Kat's book, which is actually being sold at MoMA. It's really, really interesting. It's a book that destroys itself and it requires an app. So I really want to learn about what that is. But also, the whole concept of walled gardens applies to things like Facebook, Instagram, and all these siloed versions of the internet, which happened with Web 2.0 and the consequences of that, which is something that I call corporate prudishness, right? Mm-hmm. And what is corporate prudishness is this fear that corporations have of allowing anything outside of heteronormative traditional values and things like that, and the consequences that it has. So one of the things is I had this conversation before. I actually did a conference talk in Portugal regarding this very subject, and it's something that still haunts me, right? Because you constantly see the consequences of corporate prudishness, right? And one of the things I want to know, because the general perception is that all of this is American led, but it is, but it isn't, right? Because there's different interests. Like in the end, the concern is that it's money for these corporations. So what are they going to do? They're going to bow to whatever moral or political rules each country they're operating in with has.
Right.
So, for example, in China, the censorship is different than it is in the West. It's different in, for example, in the Middle East, in Saudi Arabia. It's different than what it's in Israel, for example. And what's happening is that we're creating these very siloed internet spaces that are really limiting to what we can be or do. And one of the consequences of this is that we, especially for anyone that's interested in resistance, particularly in the art world, is that we can only be as rebellious as the corporations are comfortable with. The second you say or do something that they do not agree with, you're gone. So
Exactly. Exactly.
that's basically what the subject that I want to go into rather than talk about the other one, because otherwise we would be stealing the focus from the conference. So
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
This
about
is
that one,
yeah, yeah, no,
go
this
to
is
it.
more of a preview, especially for
It's a
people
jumping
that are
point.
in New York, a jumping off point, right? But also, we encourage people that are in New York or, that happen to be in New York in February around that time to come take a look at CEA if they're interested in learning more about our talk and panel. Um,
Yeah, and the bookshop is fantastic.
yeah, exactly. Oh, the bookshop. Yes.
Well, the book fair, but yes.
Book fair. I'm gonna have to carry like these sacks of books home, so that'll be
Oh,
interesting.
come on. You can just take a suitcase and roll it home. I have the
Oh, for
problem.
sure. Yes, you have the problem.
I have to
But
haul
in
it
any
across
case,
the continent.
yes. In any case, with what you were talking, I think what's interesting is you made mention of specifically Web 2.0, because through the research that I do, and this is specifically about artists that are working as the internet was emerging, especially the World Wide Web. Um, I feel that there was, and many people agree with this, there was much more expression, you know, uh, ability to be rebellious and lack of censorship at the time, which is really interesting also because this is like a subject I teach in my one of my classes. But when President Bill Clinton at the time was kind of like handling all these situations that were emerging with the internet and what is or is not allowed. He wanted to instill or enact a decency act, like a policy, right? And so there's this really famous person named John Perry Barlow, who he was from a band. I know I'm forgetting right at the moment, but he wrote the Declaration of Freedom for Cyberspace or the Liberation of Cyberspace, which is so important because in that declaration, and I think the story goes that he wrote it in a little napkin in around 1990 something. And in that little declaration, it became sort of a manifesto for people, the netizens at the time, right? And in that, he calls out these ideas of censorship that were sort of floating around and with the expectation of what was going to happen with Bill Clinton, who was going to enact the Decency Act, right?
Yes.
But yes, the whole idea was fighting against censorship and what you were able or not able to uh, effectively put on the internet. And so artists at this time were also grappling with all these things. And cyber feminists, for example, especially as the internet was emerging, they were rebellious. They were talking about wet, fleshy, sensual, like eroticism, and their images on the internet, the games that they would create, among so many other artworks, were controversial in many ways more than one, right? But within the context of this environment, um all that work would probably be censored today,
Yeah.
right? So
Well,
just the starting
yeah.
off.
Well, it's interesting because
John Perry Barlow.
Barlow, yeah, he was a libertarian,
Yeah.
and so he kind of bounces on like this current like line in the U.S. of like
Yes.
nothing
Absolutely.
has to be bound, but at the same time it's a little bit contradictory because of how they are. But
Yes.
it's also
He
he was a
created the
rancher and
cyber
he was a poet.
libertarians.
He did a lot of things. So he's a very contradictory person, I think.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah.
I'm gonna put a link on the description of the video because I already found the Cyberspace Independence Declaration.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so yeah, that's a really interesting thing. But one of the things I wanted to show is this little slideshow that we prepared. Just need a
Mhm.
second to
We
find
are
it.
visual people.
Yeah, we are. Let's see if it pulls. Yeah, there it is. So, okay, this is the wrong place to start. Okay,
Yeah.
so one of the things I wanted to make clear is that this censorship of art is not a new thing. Like you've had this for ages. Like for example, with Pope Clement the 13th in the 14th century, where he suddenly decides that all this nudity. Like, so this happened 60 years after Michelangelo made the David, and he had just died, and then Pope Clement decides that nudity is wrong, that nothing should have. You shouldn't be able to see anything that arouses these spirits. Basically, that's what he said. And the church makes this declaration, and they start putting fig leaves on every single statue in the Vatican. And one of the funny things that I found out is why is it fig leaves? And it's because of Adam and Eve. So basically,
Mhm.
in the Bible, it says that they cover their indecency with leaves, and it specifically says in some versions it says it's fig leaves. So as you can see here, we have this little guy with a leaf in his crotch, which just magically floats there.
Magic. Yes.
That damaged a lot of works because in some cases they were like chopped and then plastered over. In others, it was just like a plaster pasty thing, but it damaged a lot of works of art. And then we have things like the bonfire of the vanities, with around the end of the Medici reign in Florence. I don't know if you're
Uh-huh.
familiar with that.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, so this whole burning again because the church is being. This was a guy that was insane. Really, he was like hyper Catholic, completely iconoclastic, and he just decided that people should leave and eat like the most simple things. Like basically, he wanted everyone to live like a monk, and then
Uh-huh.
he actually got into a fight, like because he said that he could do miracles, and then someone was said like, "No, you can't," and then there was a duel by fire. But so a trial by fire, and they had to walk through fire literally. But before they started, like he backed out. So one of his like acolytes was like, "I'll do it for him because he will protect me."
Yeah.
And but the guy obviously he gets cold feet when he sees the bonfire and goes, "Let's talk about the rules." And they started discussing the rules of how do you determine that God is protecting you. And it took so long that it started raining and it put off the fire,
Mm.
and that was interpreted as God saying, "This guy does not have my support." And
Mhm.
then they burned him in the third and final
Oh
bonfire of the
no.
vanities, with his
You
being the
would
vanity.
you would think that with cold feet that would have been enough to walk through the fire. Ha ha
Haha.
ha.
Oh my god, that was bad. Anyhow, so the point is prudishness has always chased us. But the thing is, back then it was religious motivated, now it's profit motivated.
Right.
And if we look at other examples, like if we move into the future, then we have the Nazis in the 1930s and 40s. We have this exhibition called Entartete Kunst, and Constanza, this is your turn
Yeah,
to
this is
show off.
the degenerate art exhibition, right? So what happened is there were two exhibitions. There was a great German art exhibition, and this was resulting in collecting works that they had stolen and some which they had burned. Obviously, those were not collected. But it is estimated that 15,000 works were submitted to this exhibition jury, which included among so many artists. This had to be approved by Hitler, right? And he appointed another jury because he was upset about the works that were included. The point is that this was the 1930s, end of 1930s, I should say, when these two exhibitions were being developed. One of them, which is the Degenerate Art exhibition, which included works by predominantly Jewish artists that were considered degenerate because they were very modern, right? And which did not adhere to Hitler's propaganda and ideas of, the Aryan master race and among other things, right? And it was a defamatory show. And it's interesting because think about the logic. You want to create an exhibition that is about terrible, considered bad art, right? Because it is degenerate. And this is done in order to educate the public about this degeneracy. But what's funny about it is that the other exhibition, which was the one that celebrated German pride and artwork, which is tended to be very traditional, highly traditional artworks, no one came to visit that art show.
Yeah, it
And
definitely had more visits, the Entata de Kunst.
yeah, exactly. But
But again, go ahead.
it's no, yeah, it's interesting trying to create an art show that is supposed to teach people while also censoring it, but not censoring it in a weird dynamic, that is at play here. Um, but that's why these two exhibitions existed in parallel, right? Um, and the Degenerate Art exhibition, just according to my notes, it includes 650 paintings, sculptures, and prints as well. 2 million approximately visitors attended it, which was an average about 20,000 people per day, which is a lot. And this picture is,
Yes.
to me, one of the most uh, fascinating pictures, historical ones of just Adolf Hitler being in awe.
Looking derpy as hell.
Yeah, terrified, in awe, just flabbergasted, right, about the art that you see here in the Degenerate Art Show. So
Also, he
that's,
got so out of, like, what is going on with his legs?
I don't know, but it just goes to show you that this idea of censorship within this art show was intended to be educated form to educate the masses, right? About what you shouldn't do, what
Yeah.
ideals you shouldn't have, about how the Jewish artists were degenerate, essentially, right?
But also, like in this picture, you can see something really interesting. I don't know, like how many people have commented on this, but as a curator myself, it really stands out to me. One of the things is that the works are on the floor, and the other one is crooked. So there's obviously a
There was no care.
intentional, yeah, exactly, lack of care, right? This was
The
not by chance.
No,
Sorry.
exactly. The other thing to note is also in this exhibition, they had phrases on walls that said a very anti-Jewish rhetoric, of course,
Yeah,
and it was plastered all over, like in between the paintings and sculptures and things like that.
yeah.
Some of which were anti-Jewish, but also other ones which were very pro-Aryan race, things like that as well.
But here comes the funny thing. So one of the things that the Nazis wanted was this very traditional, very romantic view of Germany, right? With
Yeah.
very photorealistic. They were always looking at Goethe, or in terms of literature, they were looking
Yes.
at Dürer when it came to painting or engraving and all these things, right? So they wanted this hyper realism because they felt that that was what showed care and like love of art, and they thought that like what these artists were doing was careless and primitive and savage.
Yes.
The irony comes when you look at the far left as well, because when you go into the Soviet Union, what
Mm-hmm.
happens is that the Soviets interpret these same works that are in the Entata Kunst exhibition as bourgeois, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And they go back to what? To this very romantic, hyper realistic depiction.
Yes,
And so
absolutely.
you have this really interesting thing where you have the extreme left and the extreme right echoing each other in the fact that they don't like. So what we get up in is that totalitarians of either like fascist and totalitarians at the same time have this very limited grasp of creativity and freedom. Like in the end, both opposing states and very like enemies each other end up
Yeah.
with this. But then come in the Americans, and then you have things like action painting. You have Jackson Pollock, and you have the mobiles by oh god, I forgot his name right
Alder.
now. Calder and all these people, right?
Mhm.
Uh, and that was backed by the CIA as a way of saying, look, we are progressive and all this. But in the US, the most popular artists were hypernaturalistic, realistic paintings,
Mhm.
like with Kincaid and things like that. So every single civilization that has like this totalitarian streaks
Yeah, yeah.
tend to and conservative, because America is incredibly conservative. So they go for these very realistic depictions of art, and everybody, it doesn't matter. It was the left, it was the right, it was the middle. Everybody was against
That's so interesting
modern
because,
art, basically.
yeah, it's so interesting because I was reading this article about, and this is not new. Like this happened when Trump, now president of the US, came into power the first time. He wanted to go back and create more apparently neoclassical, or what is
Buildings.
the Greco-Roman buildings. And then
Yeah.
apparently a recent article said the same thing. He wanted to go back to this idea of time and architecture, right? Because it was a symbol, according to him, of something more traditional in values. And so artwork and the art world is always like encompass and at the whim of those in power, right? And how
Yeah.
you were talking about like realism, there is a thing called socialist realism,
Social
right?
realism. Yeah.
Yeah, that exists also in China with Mao. That was a very big tool for propaganda as well, right? Which is
It
another
was
story.
also in Mexico, by the way.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, it's this thing that existed everywhere, and every time that someone wanted to create like this top-down led thing, it always comes down to the classic, because we have this very entrenched idea that the epitome of art is Greco-Roman, and
Yeah.
specifically the Winkelmann interpretation of it, which is
Yeah.
super wide, which is not true.
Yeah.
But also, one of the funny things is it's all fabricated. Like artists want to create. Like, what's the point? And this is one of the things that you learn in art history. Is like with the camera. Like artists were like, "What's the point of realism? We have to go somewhere else." And the same thing we're seeing it right now with AI, forcing artists into exploring into different areas. With like maybe AI cannot touch them and things like that. So there's always some technology that's pushing them into something else, but people want to bring them back to the same traditional depictions. And if we go to what you were saying about the buildings, it's funny because I don't think in the case of Trump specifically, not the people around him, but him specifically, I think he falls more within the mores of narco aesthetics. I don't know if you ever heard of that.
No, do tell.
Okay, so this is a personal theory. I don't think there's anyone that's written about this, and if they have, please let me know. So basically, narco aesthetics is this idea I have. Like when you look at the houses of narcos in Mexico and in the U.S., you see that all of them have neoclassical houses, like Greek columns, statues, all these things. You see it in Scarface. You see it in like the actual houses for El Chapo, or what's this guy, the Colombian one, Escobar.
Oh, Escobar, yeah.
And what happens there is not that they have this white supremacist idea or interpretation of art or culture or anything, is that that's what they think rich people do,
Right.
right? So what happens is that Trump has always been this poor man's interpretation of what a rich person is,
Yeah.
right? So that's why you get all this Greek and this gold and this all this opulence, when right now the truly rich people actually look like homeless people. I don't know if you've noticed that. Uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, so if you go into like one of those Michelin starred restaurants, you'll see that like the richest people just wear like ragged jeans and t-shirts with no logos or anything.
Yeah, yeah.
So
It's much more subdued, right?
yeah, exactly.
Not so overt. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's an interesting theory. I would like to see that on in a paper for sure.
Oh God, don't make me do that. I'm gonna get
No.
murdered by the cartel. Uh, no, but yeah. So one of the things that you always hear is that wealth whispers,
Hmm. Hmm.
and Trump does not whisper. So that's what I think. There's this, but like going back into the subject, like Facebook does this constantly. Like they keep censoring things. Like for example, they censored a post by someone's posting of the Venus of Willendorf, the most desexualized depiction of a naked woman ever.
Hmm.
Um, and they considered it like lewd, and they canceled this person's account, and then they sued, and then they restated, and they apologized, and there was like this whole rigmarole. But it keeps happening. It also happened with Courbet's Origin of the World. They did the same thing again. This was a French teacher. He sued. He won. Then Facebook apologized. They reinstated it. But then it happened again with this woman coming down the stairs, and they apologized, and then they reinstated it, and then it happened again with this one, which is let me sorry, this one is the one that I never remember the name. It's woman eating ice cream. That's the one thing I remember. It's Eveline Axel, a painting,
Hmm.
and then they go. We even with things that are like really famous, like wait, no, what's on here? The other way. Even this got censored. If you guys
Wow.
know, this is a very famous sculpture of the Little Mermaid in what is it in Dutch? So it's the Netherlands.
Hmm.
Um, and it got censored by Facebook. They apologized. They reinstated it, and that's because one of the things is that Facebook and other platforms keep doing is that they let artificial intelligences judge what this is. And the problem is it's a dance with the devil because on one hand I understand why they're giving it to AI. They've had an issue with their back when they had a moderation team because they don't have one now. I wonder why. Um, one of the things they had a problem is that they had a huge burnout rate because the moderators were seeing the most horrid things being uploaded to YouTube to
Yeah,
Facebook.
yeah, I heard about that as well.
But the
Yeah.
problem is they refuse to ban people that do these things. And we know that, for example, Twitter, even before Elon Musk, was favoring right wing politicians and would not ban them for offenses that would have gotten a left wing politician banned.
Hmm.
So these things, this prudishness is only as long as they can keep the profits coming in, and they know which side their bread is buttered. So it's creating this very horrible space. And so we come to the question, what can artists do?
Exactly.
Right?
And it takes a different, this idea of censorship and prudishness, as we have shown, right, is something that has been historical, right? It's something that has always existed. Pushing a specific agenda, censoring something else in turn. But what does it mean to be an artist today, working with technology and how that's heavily, corporatized, right? So, and
Yeah,
that's where the panel comes in to discuss these issues, right?
yeah,
In
exactly.
this day and age, for sure.
So one of the things that I think is that we have to go back to Web 1 because
Yeah.
there's this myth that Web 1 was top down when it wasn't. It was bottom up. I don't,
Mhm.
and this was because of how marketers wanted to reshape the internet and turn it into what it is now.
Yeah.
Uh, but the point is that everybody had my web page, right?
Hmm.
Like the web pages became this thing where you could talk about your interests, you could upload whatever you wanted, and the only person you answered to was yourself. Obviously, it comes with certain responsibilities and consequences, right? But ISPs tend to be less, not ISPs, sorry. What is it called? Hosts. Web hosts tend to be a little bit more lenient. You can find more open-minded ones. Obviously, if someone reports that you're doing something wrong, they tend to be too fold anyways. But
Yeah.
it has to be more extreme things, right? So I think we have to go to personal web pages that are done by ourselves, not hosted on WordPress or Facebook
Hmm.
or Wix or all these things, right? And the other one is I like something that I found really funny is for a while the Museo Sai had a Pornhub webpage.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because it was the only place they could post.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah,
Wow.
and we're not gonna go into the whole history of what the Pornhub controversy was because that was a very messed up thing, and it ended up being led by right wing
Hmm.
groups that wanted to get rid of all porn everywhere, and they were exploiting, like they were caught lying about what happened on Pornhub,
Yeah,
but it
yeah,
created this controversy that we're not going to go into much. But the point is, Museo Sai had a page on Pornhub. I've known artists that wanted to do something as silly as called as plant bondage, which
okay.
involved no nudity. It was just them performing bondage on a plant with ropes and like
Oh,
whips and
okay, okay,
stuff.
okay.
It's a there's a video. I can put a link to it. These are two Mexican artists, and they did it on ChatterBait, and that was the one way that they could get around the rules that YouTube Live would have banned it because it was bondage, right? And at the same time, it let them engage with a community that's not normally exposed to art, at least not in that space. So it was a really interesting interaction. Obviously, you had
Yeah,
like
for
the
sure.
take your top off and blah blah, blah, but eventually people kind of caught what wind of what is happening, of what the joke was, and then they participated. So it was interesting. So I guess in a way, we have to find these spaces that are outside of the norm.
Well, that's one of the questions I've always had about artists, but more specifically, more activist oriented or political artists. It's a very difficult question because this is something also getting a little bit nerdy, but Gilles Deleuze and a lot of the French theorists would talk about, like Foucault also, and that is there an outside to power, and how does, and it's a tough one, right? Is there an outside to power, but also what do you do when that power absorbs these spaces that are outside of it momentarily, right? Does everything just get reabsorbed into this hegemonic power and being, right?
Well, I think so because society has become panoptic.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
Like
mm-hmm.
you see teenagers policing everybody else.
Yeah,
Well, you
mm-hmm.
see everyone policing everyone else, not just
Yeah,
teenagers. Like
not
that
just
that's
that.
being
Yeah,
unfair. But you see it like on web spaces, like, oh, you're problematic, oh, this person's problematic, and there's no space for nuance.
yes,
I'm
absolutely.
not saying that like we should not confront people with the consequences of their actions, but I think that sometimes we're too fast to judge, and sometimes we apply rules too strictly, right?
Right, right.
There was this article about this parent who's on the left politically, and their kid is obviously on the left. And he came up to her very concerned and was like, "Hey, mom, is that a pedophile?" And she's like, "What are you talking about?" She's like, "Well, dad is 5 years older than you are."
Mm-hmm.
And so these discussions about what is like an acceptable age gap have gotten so extreme that
Yeah,
children are policing their own parents, and that's a really dangerous thing. And it's one of the first examples of fascism is like getting everybody to police everyone because it makes
right.
it easier. So one of the problems is okay, you have a web page, but anyone can go and lodge a complaint with right now with the host, let's say GoDaddy or whatever, and they can get your web page taken down. Sometimes with just one act, someone can misinterpret what you're doing and again get you taken down. So
Mm-hmm.
it's becoming this thing where either you have your own web server or you're gonna have to eventually be subsumed into the panopticon again.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think you can exist outside of it, sort of, but like we know this. Like you have things like Anna's Archive or all these like book repositories that exist outside of legality,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and they exist in completely independent jurisdictions from the U.S. But because it goes against publisher interests,
Mhm.
the domains get taken by the FBI, even if they're outside of their jurisdiction. So is there a way out? Kind of, sort of, as long as you're not too loud, and that's a problem.
That is a problem, right? It just reminds me of all these artists that were working to try to exist on the periphery or on the outside or on the blind spots of these hegemonic forms of power, right? And I wonder, there's a really great anarchist author. His name is Hakim Bey. That's the name that they go by, and it was one of the earliest texts on the internet that was basically talking about anarchy and like how do we exist on the internet among all things. And so they talk about piracy and deterritorialization among other things. And he would say we have to find they said that we have to find spaces outside, even if momentarily. So there's still
Yeah.
what they're saying is that there's still value in it, to
Oh,
finding these,
absolutely.
even if you get absorbed or subsumed, right? It's
I
still a form of protest,
yeah.
rebellion, right?
I think we have to go offline more. In the end, we have to avoid the online has become this toxic space for freedom, literally.
Yeah,
And I think we
absolutely.
have to exist inside of it, and we have to create our groups like back in the day. I'm not that old, but like, I'm talking about people in the 60s, 70s, like back
Yeah,
in then when resistance groups existed outside of traditional web spaces. And
yeah.
ironically, the people who are doing that right now, the ones that exist outside of that, it's the people with the religious cults, for example,
Hmm.
who manage to find this existence where they cannot be regulated or observed. And ironically, we would have to mimic those actions, but obviously being very vigilant to not fall into cults of personality or all the
Of
failures that
course.
all these systems have. But that is
Yeah,
very hard. At the same time,
it
it's not
is.
like online, it's immune to that. So it's
No,
just a different
absolutely.
form of risk.
Yeah, it is. And I'm just hitting everyone with like a whole bunch of references now. But it's a
That's the
really
fun part.
interesting, yeah, that's a fun part. There's a really great artist collective called Critical Art Ensemble who did a lot of works, but they also published a lot in the 19, started in 1994. And they spoke about electronic disobedience,
Hmm.
which is taken from this idea of disobedience, right? That you would have in public spaces. So, like, for example, standing in a municipal building or a government building and not leaving, right? Public sit ins, for example. And it's funny researching and reading their books because at some point they say the only form of protest that is possible now is you have to go online and do this. And this is where you get started with, piracy, but also, what do you call them? Forms of hacking that were really popular back in the day. And at the end, though, when you started reading all their texts, at some point they said, well, actually, we have to go back to the public sit ins. We have to go back to public protest and rebellion because the internet is no longer a place where it cannot only be the place where we form groups for protest and rebellion either. Right. So
Yeah.
they like changed their mind because they see how the internet, among other this online space has progressed to being heavily censored, for example, and the change that it resulted from Web 2.0, right?
Yeah,
Which
definitely.
it's exactly what you were saying. So I definitely think about spaces outside now of the internet, like grassroots activism, for instance, right? Community is a huge one that many people don't consider as acts of, you know, resistance, right? And I think we
Yeah.
need to form more of those for sure.
So going to that, what you mentioned, I'm gonna share one screen again. Just give me
Yeah.
a second here. I just clicked the wrong button. I'm gonna share this real quick. There we go. So there's this person, Callie, who made a tweet saying, "I love pirating indie games," with a shot of them pirating this game called Ultra Kill, which is an independently developed video game. And the developer for that game, and he is the one person, I think he developed it on his own, tweeted back, like retweeted this person, and he said, as creator of said game, you should support indie if you can, but culture shouldn't exist only for those who can afford it. Ultra Kill wouldn't exist if I hadn't had early access to movies, music, and games growing up. If you don't have money, you can support via word of mouth.
Wow.
Even more business-minded people around can recognize that if you pirate a game, they enjoy it, spread the word about it, and get someone else to buy it. That's at worst an equal trade. At best, an additional sale that wouldn't have happened if you hadn't pirated it. And I totally subscribe to this idea, especially growing up Mexican. You had to pirate video games, movies, everything, because they would not come to us. And it wasn't a loss for the companies because they were not interested in selling these things to us.
Yeah, it's a question of accessibility, right? Exactly.
And just like this guy says, I can't remember his name. I wouldn't be the person I am without access to these works. If I hadn't pirated Dungeons and Dragons in the 80s, if I hadn't pirated video games that I was not able to get in Mexico, I wouldn't have the know-how to do the things I do now. Again, culture shouldn't be only for those who can afford it, and that's one thing that we're losing sight of. We have video games that are $80 now. They're talking about they're hoping, like publishers are hoping that Grand Theft Auto 6 sells for $100. Because then they'll be able to raise prices, and they say it's to support the budgets of these new games, but it's not. It's not going to be for that. It's just going to be profit. So yeah, I think if we're going to close on something, is that culture shouldn't just be for those who can afford it or those who can access it.
Exactly.
And that's the problem with the walled garden, that it's closing access to so many things.
I love how we did a complete circle. It's good. No, that's perfect. Yeah, absolutely. And I'm very excited to see what our conversations are going to be at the panel, right? I think we have some really good questions, some thought-provoking ones, maybe some difficult ones even. And I'm curious to see what the public is going to interject and think about with us, right? Because it's not about thinking alone, it's thinking with us about these issues.
No, totally.
And building community, right? Community is so important.
Yeah, creating communities with people face to face, ideally.
Yeah, exactly.
Even if it's local, like it doesn't have to be international. I think local action is more important in the end.
Yeah. Exactly.
So with all that said, please go to CAA February, I think it's the 14th.
February, I can check really quick right now.
All right, well, Constanza checks that. Please come visit us if you see us, say hi. We're always willing to talk for a bit. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And
15th, yes.
12th
to the 15th, I believe.
12th to the 15th, and then I believe we are on the 14th. So
no, 13th. We're on the 13th.
Oh, we're on the 13th? Okay, cool. So nobody has to sacrifice their Valentine's dates to see us. That's good.
Yeah.
Anyhow, thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Bye. Bye.